So here we're going to take just half an hour to appreciate a little bit how important it is to take key cross-cutting themes into account and promote intersectoral collaboration throughout the planning process. So I'm going to bring back this slide I showed you at the beginning of the workshop on Tuesday, where we have made this attempt to put on a timeline our ERP planning here and how it complements more longer-term disaster risk reduction strategies, and how with this loop process we prepare well with our advanced preparedness actions right before the onset of a crisis to be able to quickly respond. And you see that how in all countries we can build our minimum level of emergency preparedness that are the foundation on which we are then, when a big hazard of high gravity is upon us and we need to enter into a more advanced level of preparedness. So throughout all this, so while working on this ERP approach, you'll realize that these are the planning output can be then somehow brought back to different work streams. And this is how we are thinking also that strengthening ERP planning is a way to maybe also support building a closer bridge between humanitarian and development, the so-called humanitarian development nexus. And throughout this, all the steps we've seen how we're going to be able, and we'll see a little bit more today, I hope, how we can promote, working with local actors, make sure that we have accountability to affected population taken into account, gender, the needs of person with disabilities, all this be taken into account throughout all the phases of this ERP approach. So this is really for you and your partners, very importantly, to appreciate how important it is to adopt a more people-centered programming approach throughout all steps of the ERP planning, and to understand that it's key to abide by the principles and commitments of accountability to affected population. By doing so, your contingency plan, your ERP plan, will be designed in respect of the rights, dignity, and safety of people affected by disaster and conflict, and their unique needs by gender, age, disability, and diversity are identified and will be addressed, and all segments of an affected community can equally access and benefit from assistance. So we'll look at those key cross-cutting themes in the first part of the session, and in the second part of the session, we'll explore how the ERP approach also represents an opportunity to promote intersectoral collaboration, and it's also a phase where we can explore the use of cash and voucher assistance. And again, I appreciate how, again, strengthening your level of emergency preparedness can be a means toward building the humanitarian development nexus and promoting partnerships with local stakeholders and empower local actors. That's the so-called localization agenda, if I may say. All these key transversal themes will contribute maximizing the quality and adequacy of your emergency response from the initial phase of it. Okay? So let me ask you this. So here are a few of those key transversal themes. I just mentioned a bunch of them. Can you recall from the previous workshop sessions any step that you think could represent an opportunity to mainstream one of these key cross-cutting themes? Can I have maybe a participant who would like to volunteer and share a thought on this? How do you think we can, or what step do you think we could use to make sure we mainstream, accountability to affected population principles? So we take into account gender-based violence risk and have prevention and mitigation measures. When can we pay attention to the special needs of persons with disabilities? Eduardo, yes, you want to come in?
Sure. I think that has to be in all the stages of the cycle. I mean, why do you have to choose one of them?
Sorry, Eduardo, I cannot. I think I have a sound.
It has to be in all the stages. It has to be during all stages.
Exactly. Yes. So basically, you'll see in all stages. Yeah, thank you, Ruth, as well. I saw a comment on the chat box. You'll see that in the guide, when we've developed the step-by-step guide, we've consulted experts on each of those key cross-cutting themes who are closely working with the technical alliance of the GNC. And with these experts, we've tried to provide practical recommendations on how to link your nutrition emergency preparedness efforts with approaches to mainstreaming these key cross-cutting themes, and proposed specific examples of preparedness actions that you have in the guide. So, for instance, for accountability to affected population and the prevention of sexual exploitation and abuse, you'll find key concepts in the background section of the guide, and we are describing this from the very beginning as being imperative principles. And you'll see that during, for instance, step 3, mapping existing response capacities, for instance, it is recommended to make sure that your nutrition cluster partners are well sensitized on these key accountability to affected population principles. And if they are not, then you frame it as a preparedness action. Okay, and the guide includes many links to key resources, including the YASC policy on accountability to affected population. And you'll find that the global nutrition and food security clusters jointly developed a guidance on how to mainstream AAP in the humanitarian project cycle. And we also provided the link to the UNICEF AAP handbook and toolkit that are, I think, quite useful. And we've done that for all those key cross-cutting themes. So on gender, you'll find a lot from these beautiful guidelines from the protection cluster, the guidelines on integrating gender-based violence interventions within other sectors for humanitarian actions. And you'll find a lot of those suggestions for many steps of the ERP approach: risk analysis, scenario building, response analysis, and design. It is, and I said it many times already, how it is recommended to make sure we have data, sex and age disaggregated data and information, how we recommend to take gender norms. Let me make this bigger. How we recommend to take gender norms into consideration, understand how those norms might be affected by a shock and how they might change at times of crisis. It's important to take this into account, okay? And make sure that the nutrition and emergency personnel are sensitized on gender-related risks, and that we are all aware of the referral, any existing referral mechanisms for GBV victims and how to use those referral mechanisms. This is one example that you will find in the guide. Okay, so I don't have time today to go through each and every cross-cutting theme like this, but you'll find, again, much more in the guide, including on disability inclusion. Okay. Okay. So the next part of the session, just checking time. The next part of the session is more to discuss multisectoral programming. Okay. And here I know how convinced you are already. I know you know this very well, that preventing and treating malnutrition can only be achieved through the provision of coordinated multi-sectoral interventions, right? So to maximize our chance to prevent this vicious cycle of infectious disease and malnutrition, we need this convergence, or even better, true integration of activities from, health, WASH, food security, and nutrition actors. This is critical. And here we have Edward also joining us today, specialist on early childhood development. And it's important also during the ERP to appreciate how we can use it to promote holistic interventions that will support also caregivers' ability to provide an adequate nurturing care, including at times of emergencies, so that we support from an early phase, early childhood development and protect early childhood development. Okay, so I'm going to pause here for a moment and ask colleagues, online participants, if you want to share any examples of actions you are currently undertaking in your countries to promote this intersectoral collaboration and programming. If we can hear an example. Yes, Isaac, please.
Well, Sister, just to share what is currently going on, and I think for the last several months since last year, from the nutrition sector, we tried to reach out to our colleague from the other sector, the sector coordinators, in terms of how we can work together and strengthen and optimize the integration among the different sectors. So we developed some kind of activities which we were calling minimum package for the different sectors. So we sent to them, they reviewed it. But recently, I think since last month, we had a meeting with all the sector coordinators. I think WASH, nutrition, food security, and education, and I think protection as well. So they took it now, a bit more and giving it more weight. So they are currently, we revised those activity which you had suggested in order to reflect the reality from their respective sector. So it was, I think, completed, last 2 weeks. So currently they have circulated it to all their respective sectors to provide some final input. And once it's done, our plan is to I think work on it on two kind of fronts. One is that individual partners who are operating nutrition services in their respective area, they can use it as a guiding. But at the same time, we're also discussing the possibility of doing some kind of multiple vulnerability analysis, where we have the highest kind of vulnerability of all the sector, and maybe we can choose 2, 3, 4, 5 maybe localities where we can optimize the intervention by all the sectors. So we're trying to we have started actually discussing with OCHA to see if they can fund those kind of multi-sector intervention in those areas, and maybe also trying to reach out to some of the donors which we normally meet on a quarterly basis if they can support. So yeah, basically, as you're saying, yes, this is exactly what we are doing here. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Isaac. This is great. It's a very good examples on how little by little we can start at least with 1 or 2 and maybe more sectors, and how to advance on this intersectoral collaboration. We can hear from other colleagues as well. I see a hand from John. You want to share something, John?
Yeah, sure. Just confirm you hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Great, thank you. So in northeast Nigeria, an example I can share is the lean season, lean/line season response plan, which we developed jointly with the food security, WASH, and health. So basically, this is nested within the HRP, it's a component of the HRP, but we know that our caseloads and of course problems within the other sectors as well kind of multiply during the lean rain season. So as a way to accelerate implementation and also to advocate for resources to come in early, so we developed this kind of advocacy response plan, which is costed, by the way, as part of the HRP. So it's a pull out from the HRP, but kind of to generate urgency for funding, and also to ensure that partners quickly scale up their responses during this during the lean stroke rain season, which is basically around from May to September. So that has been it has worked well for us, of course, in terms of ensuring that the 4 life-saving sectors or clusters, come together to agree on a common, advocacy approach, but also prioritization of where to implement, activities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John, for sharing. This is another good examples on how to go about fostering this intersectoral collaboration with very clear objectives. Yeah, thank you very much. And Ruth, you want to share as well?
Yes, thanks very much, Cicely. So for us, this year, what we've done is to identify counties or areas, geographical areas with multiple deprivations. So looking at the key drivers of malnutrition from, health, WASH, food insecurity, as well as also gender perspective. And based on that, agreed with the different clusters that what are the priority areas for them, the priority geographical areas, and we overlay each of the findings from each of the sector, and based on that we zeroed in where we have multiple deprivation. So we have about 17 counties that we've prioritized as areas where you not only have nutrition as a problem, you have health as a problem, you have WASH as a problem, you have food insecurity as a problem, as well as also gender related issues as a problem. So based on this, then we've zeroed in to say these are the priority interventions that we are going to have by each of the sectors. So agreed, some quite similar to what Isaac has shared in terms of minimum package of interventions that has to be done by each of the sectors. But more importantly is about also coordination and communication to make sure that each of the sector partner knows what the other partner is expected to do. So nutrition partners should know what they should expect from WASH partners, and WASH partners should also know what they expect from nutrition partners, so that at the service delivery level, there's actually action and it's not just on paper. So this is what we are doing, and we've also done joint advocacy, for example, for funding. So for any funding that is coming in, we are saying to the donors, these are the geographical areas that need to be prioritized. And in addition to that is also common monitoring. So there are some indicators that we do collect that are actually from the other sectors, and then we are able to exchange, for example, malaria for health, for example, or for WASH related indicators that we do collect and do sort of share. And then periodically, we then do invite each of the clusters in our various cluster meetings to kind of share and discuss what's the progress, the challenges, how do we course correct what is happening, and inviting also the sub-cluster levels at the state level to present during the national cluster coordination meetings for them to share the experiences. So this has been quite an exciting period, and I think we hope next year we can even do much more beyond just the 17 counties. Over.
Thank you very much, Ruth. This is just music to my ears. This is great experience and examples of how ideally this should be done exactly that way in as many places as possible. So for those of you who may not have reached that level of truly intersectoral collaboration, well, you can go through those guiding questions and reflect on the examples we've just heard from our colleagues, and maybe start thinking whether, for instance, you have a cluster or a sector you're already working more closely with, and start with that sector at least. And see whether you could have, if needed, if relevant, tools for joint assessment of needs, and whether you can engage with other clusters and sectors in also a joint response analysis and design, with defining a minimum package of a set of few activities from the various sectors that will be your multi-sectoral emergency response package, predefined, and having a joint targeting approach. This is key in defining the priority locations. You want this multi-sectoral response package to be delivered, and this is also very useful to prioritize where also we have needs with multiple deprivation, like Ruth described. And so having a joint targeting approach also to make sure that you'll have the same communities in the same areas receiving this multi-sectoral response at the same time. This is really critical. And maybe you need to establish a task force or a multi-sectoral working group. And recall that we have at the GNC a help desk, a dedicated help desk on intersectoral collaboration. So do not hesitate also to reach out to Rachel Lozano in case you need some support with that. And also at this phase of preparedness, it's really also a good moment to start considering the feasibility, acceptance, and modalities of using cash and voucher assistance for nutrition outcomes. So here again, in the guide, we have a cash expert working closely with the GNC, who developed a one-page annex, I think it's Annex 4, that summarizes a much more comprehensive guidance on cash and voucher assistance for nutrition outcomes. So I really encourage you to see again there, what are the key first preparedness actions you can undertake to start moving forward with this, the possibility of doing cash, even at a fairly early stage of the response. Okay. And I forgot to mention, again, we have a bunch of, for cross-cutting themes, we have a lot of the modules, the e-learning modules on the GNC Learn platform and on Agora, where you will understand specifically, this is one example of how to mitigate the risk of gender-based violence in a nutrition response. So there you'll find even more support on how to, again, mainstream integrate those key cross-cutting themes. Okay. So we don't have time today. Again, you know, it's really a summary of the full workshop package we've recently developed. But when you will do that with your partners, maybe take the time, if you think it's relevant, to split your audience, your partners, in small groups and have them reflect on those key opportunities at each given step of the ERP approach to advance on multisectoral programming, including for this to happen from the initial early phase of the response, and maybe come up with 2 to 3 prioritized preparedness action that will help moving in that direction. Okay. I think we have, I don't know if Eduardo, you want to come in at this stage to complement a little bit my points here. The guide was only fairly recently worked on together with Eduardo, ECD, and emergency specialist. So we're going to adjust a little bit it to add more examples of preparedness actions to also work on the early childhood development. It's not fully fleshed yet in the guide, but we'll work on it very soon. If there are any remarks, any questions, colleagues, or Eduardo, if you want to come in.
I don't have anything else to add. I think the fact that we are looking into this very carefully because it is important for everyone. And as you said, Cecile, you don't have to convince anyone. It's like this is preaching to the choir. All our professionals in nutrition really want to do intersectorality and to increase the quality of their programs. I think for ECD, it's almost like more of a natural thing because obviously we know that nutrition had these 2 areas of obviously diets and food, but also stimulation and engagement with the children that help the better intake of nutrients in the body and the importance of those years, which are, you know, from 0 to 8. In the case of nutrition, is from 0 to 5 plus pregnant and lactant breastfeeding women. And we already know what is the importance of those years, and it's almost like a natural target group for us and that intersectorality. So, but it's great that in the guide also there are those mentions that trigger us. Oh, it's not only just to run around in emergencies and provide food, but how that food is going to be sure that we reduce risk on gender violence, that we promote the stimulation of the brain of children and working with families and ensuring that WASH colleagues are there. The examples were pretty good. Anyways, this is like we know this is the right track, and we just have to reinforce them, strengthen it, and doing things more systematically. Thanks, Cecile.
Thank you, Eduardo. Okay, so colleagues, this is the end of this session. If there are no further remarks on this for now, I see I see on the chat box that we have, yes, we have Ben, who is providing again the link to place any request for support you may have. Use that link. That's the way to go for any request for support on any topic. And then Denka is also providing the specific link with modules, e-learning modules on cross-cutting themes in the humanitarian coordination channel. Okay, thank you, colleagues. Okay, so we can stop the recording and move to the next session.